Well, hey everybody, today is March 30th, and I want to welcome you to your online Bible study where we are walking through the Bible in a year. We are finishing up the book of Joshua today, and it's actually 1387 BC, if you were wondering about the timeline. And I want to say hello to Caesar here. He's a member of our class. He doesn't show up in every video, but I just never know when he's going to come, but today he liked the lesson, so he said, I'm going to come in and say hello to everyone. Yeah. I'll try not to let him distract me as we go through the lesson today. I've entitled it Peace in the Land, because if you've done your reading, you know that after God sent the Israelites into the land and helped them defeat their enemies and took them into this place that he had promised their ancestor Abraham, they had peace. Peace is just wonderful. I remember my son's fourth grade teacher. I'll never forget. And Lynn, if you're watching, you probably will remember when we came into your room that one day after school, and you told us about the little boy who was he over in the corner or something? And you said, so-and-so, what are you doing? And he said, I'm just having some peace. We thought that was hilarious, and we say that. Tyler and I say that to each other all the time. What are you doing? I'm just having some peace. So the Israelites are just having some peace in the land today. Isn't peace good? The scripture I've pulled out for you today, Joshua 24:15, is really one of my favorites. As for me and my family, some translations say, as for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord. And that is what our family says. That I know it's what your family says too. I just love that. I want to remind you something in yesterday's reading, Joshua 21, verse 43. So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors, and they took possession of it, and they settled there. The Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their ancestors. Not one of their enemies withstood them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hands. Not one of all the Lord's good promises to the house of Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled. God is so good. I mean, if he's going to make a promise, he is going to make absolutely sure to fulfill it. That's just in his nature. That is just an attribute of the Lord. He does not lie. He cannot lie. And he is just able, because he's God, he's just able to fulfill all of his promises. Now, beginning in Joshua 22, we see that the eastern tribes are being congratulated by Moses for obeying everything. Joshua says, go home, enjoy your plunder. They had been gone, 7 years, I think? They'd been gone 7 years. And on the way home, they build this altar. And Phinehas, do you remember Phinehas? He was a great intercessor. He evidently has delegation skills. Phinehas leads a delegation of 10 elders to go meet these tribes as they're going home to ask them why they built an altar. Now, what's the big deal about building an altar? Well, if they were building this altar as a place of worship, they would be angering God, because God was very, very clear in saying, you only worship me in the place that I designate. Because remember, the peoples of that time, they would just squat down on a hill and they would just worship the Baal of that valley. There was a Baal of this hill and a Baal of this hill. And remember, we learned that Baal, B-A-A-L, you'll read that in the Bible, means Lord. And this was just a polytheistic culture. God did not want to be worshipped in that way. God is God. God is the God of gods, and he wants to be worshipped where he designates. So if this really was an altar where the people wanted to worship God, they could be bringing down a curse of God's anger on all of Israel. So this delegation goes out to find out. Notice they ask questions before they jump to conclusions. They're fearful of what they're going to find out, but they don't retaliate or do anything until they ask questions. Phinehas leads this delegation, and they found out that the eastern tribes did not build it for that reason. Whew, thank goodness. The reason they built it was because they loved God, and they were afraid. This is so sweet. They were afraid that because they lived on the other side of the Jordan, and everyone else lived on this side of the Jordan, and Shiloh was over here, and this is where the tabernacle was, that generation upon generation upon generation later, they would be excluded, and that they wouldn't be allowed to worship Yahweh. So this was sort of a memorial built to remind future generations that Israel means both sides of the Jordan River. So yes, they were starting to feel a little alienated because they were on that side, but they didn't want to ever be unable to worship Yahweh, worship their God. And that was a good reason to build this particular memorial. So the people went home, everything was fine, the altercation was, just kind of fizzled out, and everything was good. The application here for us is that we can't judge a book by its cover. I'm sure you've heard that before. We always have to remember, whether it's in our business, whether it's at home, it's with our children, with our spouse, before we jump to conclusions, we need to ask questions, and we need to find out. Being good communicators, asking good questions before we jump to conclusions, before we get angry. Now, Joshua, we have to say goodbye to Joshua today. Joshua dies at a ripe old age of 110, and we remember him today that he was a strong leader, he was a strong conqueror. He also had the gift of administration. God called him to apportion the tribes, their land, and so he had to administer that whole process, and that took years. Today we see him as a shepherd. We see him as a strong shepherd, reminding, warning, and caring for the people. He is renewing the covenant that God made with the generations before. This was not an everlasting covenant, so it had to be renewed with each generation. And so this is what he was doing. He was reminding them to be aware of the heathen nations in the land and their practices. He was reminding them to hold fast to the Lord. And Psalm 44:3 reaffirms Joshua's thought. It says, "They did not conquer land with swords. It was not their own strong arm that gave them victory. It was your right hand, O God, and your strong arm, and your blinding light from your face that helped them, for you loved them." And that is so true, that is how they received the victory. So today we're saying goodbye to Joshua. We're saying goodbye to Joseph. Did you know Joseph also died at 110 years old? And I think the reason that the writer inserted that into the text, Joseph died way back before the people even left the Exodus, before they even left Egypt. But one of his dying requests was that his bones would be taken out of Egypt and buried in the land of, I think it said the land of Canaan, didn't it? And that's where they buried him. I think if I remember correctly, it was in Shechem. But so Joseph's bones are buried just as he requested. And we're also saying goodbye to Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the high priest. So he was the second high priest of Israel. So 3 are at rest. 3 men of faith are at rest today in the Promised Land. And the reminder is there is peace. There is peace. Peace is available. We can count on God. And I'll just remind you, it's going to be a short video today, but I'll just leave you with this. Joshua 24:15. Can you say this about your family, your house? "As for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord." Well, I know that you can. Well, this is a short lesson today. I'm going to go ahead and break it off here. Blessings to you and your family, and I can't wait to see you again next time when we go into the book of Judges. See you then.